Welcome to another edition of Around the Table with Stacy Smith as we take a look at the political scene. The political ads keep airing with charges and countercharges. And in the midst of all of that, the contest to be the next senator from the state of Pennsylvania is dominating the political news nationally as well, and with good reason. The polls have tightened. There's also the unknown in the election. It appears that fewer people are requesting mail-in ballots this election compared to 2 years ago. So will that have any impact on the race? That's one of the questions we're going to talk about today as I introduce you to my panel of experts and political analysts, and they are former governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Corbett. Mr. Corbett also served as the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania and also as Attorney General for the state of Pennsylvania. Mr. Corbett now teaches law at Duquesne University. Also, Jim Byrne, who is the chairman emeritus of the Democratic Party in the state of Pennsylvania. Jim also served as president of the Allegheny County Council and a longtime mayor of Millvale. Jim is an attorney in town. We go back around the table. We find Keith Schmidt. Keith's background in politics goes back to the Reagan presidency, and Keith was the state director for former Republican Senator Rick Santorum for Pennsylvania, and he also was a consultant to Santorum's 2012 presidential bid. Keith has his own consulting firm. Seated across the table is someone I always like to say on the Democratic side is the great philosopher of Around the Table, and that person is none other than Joe Mystic. Joe's a guiding light for a lot of people in the Democratic Party and has consulted on campaigns across the state. He also served in several roles in city government for the city of Pittsburgh, including deputy mayor. Joe teaches law at Duquesne University, and you can read his thoughts on politics and life in the Trib. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us again. We're getting closer to the election, so I say let's delve into it right now. In 2020, 2.5 million people voted by mail in Pennsylvania. Most of them were Democrats. This year, at least at this point, only 1.1 million people have requested a mail-in ballot. So, Governor, does this spell trouble for the Democrats?
I don't think it spells trouble for anybody because I think what it reflects is, one, people are going to the polls. They're probably still going to go to the polls. They're not staying home because of COVID. And two, this election, this midterm election, doesn't generate the excitement that a presidential election generates. And I think the Democrats will continue to have a greater percentage of people doing mail-in voting. My colleagues can comment on that than Republicans will, because I think Republicans like to go in and see people in the polls and be able to say, I was there and placed my ballot or made the check mark or submitted my ballot in person.
All right. So you don't think it's going to have an effect as far as on the Democratic turnout in this race?
I don't think it's going to have an effect one way or the other.
Joe, your thoughts?
Well, I think it'll probably affect both parties about the same. And again, Democrats will have the advantage in mail-in voting because older voters, many of whom live in our urban centers and are registered Democratic, prefer mail-in voting. So I don't think it changes the percentages at the end of the day, although the vote total will be different.
Well, I disagree with both of you. I mean, it's 60%, nearly 60% less than in 2020. I understand it's a midterm, and I understand less people will come to the polls, but not 60% less. So, I remember all too well election night in 2020. When we went off the air after hours and hours, I was pushing you guys to declare Trump the victor in Pennsylvania based on 85% returns, and the same in 5 other states, when it was statistically an anomaly you couldn't win. Well, sure enough, we lost those races largely because they underestimated the mail-in ballots. And talking about ground game, the Democrats executed one hell of a ground game in 2020. They put so many mail-in ballots in that even the national news sources didn't even factor them into the numbers and put the wrong percentages up. So for that game plan, that ground game, not to be as enthusiastic this time and a drop in 1.4 million requests. If you don't think that's going to change the outcome, you're kidding yourself. Advantage Republicans.
Stacy, the 2.2 million in 2020 versus the 1.1 million. What was the number, Keith?
2.5 million.
2.5 in 2020, and we're at 1.1. That 2.5 was when everything was counted. Was that 2.5 on October the 12th of 2020? Because that's where we are today.
I do not have that number. I'm just going by the statistics that I read. So I'm sorry, I don't have the number.
I would suggest that data tells you the 2.5 when everything was done and everything was counted is what came in. We're at October the 12th with over 14 days, give or take, to go, when all ballots must be submitted. So, where were we on October 12th of 2020? When did the big rush or the big, mass submission or people filing their absentee ballots take place in 2020? It's too soon to say how many will come out and vote with absentee ballot because we still have a lot of time to go. If this was October 25th or 26th and that was the number, yeah, then maybe some of those arguments that Keith posits could be made. I don't think that we can say that at this point. And let's see where we go with the total at the end of the cycle. But I agree with the governor and Joe on this. There's so many other variables that we have to look at to explain why that number is where it is right now. And anything that anybody puts out there could be correct. We're not going to know until the votes are counted. A lot of folks are coming out of COVID now. They want to go back out. Others just haven't mailed in their ballots yet. As simple as that. There may be a nominal amount of folks still undecided. That remains to be seen. But to say that it's some type of a crystal ball with 2.5 weeks to go to show a red wave in Pennsylvania across the country, I think is just a little bit premature. Maybe in 2 weeks, but not yet.
Well, the reality is that the mail-in ballot effort was an excellently executed game plan for the Democrats. It wasn't for Republicans. So the numbers don't lie. Right now, those numbers are dramatically down. It was never part of our game plan. So if it's going to affect anybody, my point is it will probably affect Democrats more than Republicans because it's not in our strategy book.
Okay. We will move on. We'll take a break and we'll be back in just a moment.